Welcome to the Bell Cow Author Roundup podcast, where we celebrate Minnesota's incredible fiction authors and the stories that make our literary scene so vibrant. I'm Rob Jung.
And I'm Michael MacBride. Together, we're the team behind Bell Cow Productions and the Bell Cow Catalog, a digital catalog designed to connect Minnesota authors with readers, libraries, and indie bookstores.
The catalog will be heading to all 377 Minnesota libraries, 80 plus indie bookstores, plus those in border cities such as Sioux Falls, Fargo, Superior, and La Crosse.
And now with this podcast, we get to bring those amazing voices to life. Every episode features one of our herd members talking about their books, their writing journey, and the stories behind the stories.
And before we start, let us apologize for all the cow-related puns you're about to hear.
All right, let's dig in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bell Cow Author Roundup podcast. I'm Rob Jung with Bell Cow guru Michael MacBride. And with us today, we are so excited to have S.L. Woeppel, who has become my newest favorite author. Stephanie, welcome to Bell Cow.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm
And
ready.
I have to say, like, his love has been infectious. I grabbed The Butcher and the Liar at Minnesota Mystery Night and devoured it very quickly. We'll talk about that later, but it just, I don't know, it's exciting. Like when there is an author that you kind of connect with a friend with, and I've kind of enjoyed that piece of that with Rob. So anyway, but I'm really curious about like beginnings. So like earliest writings, like what are some of the earliest things you did that resemble anything that you would call writing?
Well, funny. I was thinking about this the other day, but actually the first thing that I remember writing and getting really positive feedback is we had a contest, and I can't remember what grade I was in, maybe fifth, sixth, seventh grade, something like that, where we were assigned to rewrite the Stations of the Cross because I grew up in a Catholic school. So I wrote a whole it's the same thing, but it's, in completely different words. I wrote the Stations of the Cross, and it was very well received. And we did a whole mass ceremony, and they read my Stations of the Cross, and I just felt like on top of the world. So that was probably my first positive reinforcement of writing anything.
Wow. And here I thought you meant by rewriting. I thought you had to reimagine it or something. I was like, man, that is a crazy
it's a
thing to ask somebody to
reimagining
do.
from the perspective of Jesus is what it was. That was the assignment. And so
Wow.
I don't know. I wish I still had it. I don't think I do, though.
Where do you go from there?
I don't know. That was my peak. It's all been downhill.
Wow, that's impressive. So have you ever thought of revisiting that and just now writing that? No, you're not going to write a book.
No, I'm not going to touch that. I'm sure it was perfect then, and I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to let perfection lie. Yeah, no.
Okay. Well,
no, but then I wrote in my high school literary magazine, and I wanted to be a photojournalist for a while, and I love taking pictures, and I love writing stories, and it was kind of just part of, my mom was a writer, and she was a writer of poetry. And so I wrote really terrible poetry in high school, as many young people do. But yeah, it was definitely part of who I was as a youngster.
Well, as an adult, you have moved around a great deal. As let's say you have sought to discover yourself.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I went to school in Nebraska. That's where I'm from, and then very quickly after college, went to live in New York, where I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I had an English and history degree because I wanted to be a writer. And I moved to New York, but I didn't have any real prospects about it. So I wasn't ready to write novels. And everyone around me was extremely ambitious and knew what they wanted to do and had a path. And I felt just lost. And so I was like, well, I better get in gear and figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life to pay this rent. And so I got a job. I went back to grad school, and I spent most of my 20s in New York working really hard in my career of finance. And then I moved to Connecticut for a little while. And then I made my way back to the Midwest to Chicago, and I was there for 10 years. And that's where I really started sort of revisiting writing. I used to walk to work. I lived in Fulton Market, which was like the old meatpacking district. And it was a mile and a half from downtown where I worked. And so I'd walk to work every day and I walk home. And I found that I spent most of my time while walking imagining stories just to kill time and to, decompress from the day or whatever. And then eventually I put pen to paper, and that's kind of where I fell back into writing. And it just sort of lended itself to the novel writing. It didn't necessarily mean to start that way, but that's what happened.
So I'm
And then
wondering
I've been in St. Paul for 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, in the lost years when you weren't writing, were you still generating stories? Was there some outlet for those kind of things during, I don't know, we'll call it the New York, Connecticut financial period, whatever?
Not that I can really recall. I was so busy. I was working full time. I was going to grad school. I was studying for tests, certification tests, and being married, and then being in New York, right? And being young still, and going out and having fun, and exploring the city. So I just kind of like let it go for a while, and I didn't even really know if I would get back to it. And then when I hit about 30 years old is when I really decided to dive back in.
Gotcha.
What were you doing in Connecticut? Just out of curiosity, were you still in the? Go ahead.
I was still in the same business. I actually commuted to New York City from Connecticut for 1 year,
Okay.
which was quite an ordeal. But we moved there because my husband had a job opportunity, which was a really good one for him. And then we decided, if we're going to live in a place like Connecticut, we might as well be closer to home and closer to family. So we decided to get a little bit closer, because my entire family and my husband's entire family is in Nebraska. So it was nice to be.
Are you still working in the investment field?
Yeah.
Okay. So you haven't made the billions of dollars from writing yet that allows you to become just an author?
Self-publishing needs a source of money in order to do the work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I have not quit my day job.
Right.
I find sometimes having that day job is a good balance, though. Like weirdly, like when I was the most busiest, I was probably the most productive, because like I found those pockets of time and they were kind of precious and I held on to them.
Yes.
Like I kind of worry, if I didn't have a bunch of stuff to do, that I might not be productive. I don't know, but
I totally understand that. I totally get that. When you're really busy, you get the most done. And when things are slow, you don't get anything done. Because you're just like, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. But yeah.
Yeah, we all work against a deadline better. But how do you structure your days or your weeks to give yourself time to write?
It ebbs and flows quite a bit. I do most of my writing on the weekends. I would say I get up early and I work for probably 5, 6, sometimes 8 hours on Saturday and Sunday. Not every Saturday and Sunday. I do have a little bit of a life, but it depends on how in the zone I am. If I'm really in the zone, I can come home after work and write. But I have to be like really in the zone, or I can do editing work then. But I have a hard time at 5 o'clock starting with a creative mind.
Yeah.
Unless I'm kind of, in it. But it's when I get a chance, and then some weeks I don't get to it at all. And then some weeks I'm, 20, 30 hours. So it's just, it depends.
yeah, you take it when you can.
Exactly.
I'm curious then, what brings us to Flipping the Birdie? What's the origin of that story, and how does that book come to be then?
So that was actually the third book I wrote. I wrote that after Butcher and the Liar, although I did a ton of editing work. I wrote the first draft of Butcher and the Liar, and I was kind of stuck. And so I stepped away and I wrote Flipping the Birdie, and then I came back to Butcher and the Liar and did a lot of editing work and figured out where I wanted to go with it. But yeah, they're very different books, and I don't necessarily, I'm not going to ever write in a specific genre. I just think of a story that I want to tell, a story that's in my brain, and go with it. Yeah, I mean, this one I was feeling, Flipping the Birdie, I was kind of feeling in a like women empowerment, sort of finding your femininity and balancing that with your masculinity, and that's the story that came out with it. I think everything I've written has a sense of duality with characters. Maybe I think everything I've written, there's some sort of like other identity that somebody is grappling with. And I think that's really actually probably more common in more books than we realize. It's probably almost in every single book. In a sense, that's what makes characters interesting. But I think it's just more overt and obvious with some of the stories I write. And it's very much in my mind when I'm writing about sort of managing, whether it's a life and a massive secret that is, basically creates this whole other identity that you don't want the world to see, or it's a more fun-loving kind of thing like Flipping the Birdie, where it is actually a true secret identity. I don't know, something about that. I think, and I mentioned this, I think at Mystery Night, is I think it kind of goes back to growing up in Catholic school where, so much talk of Jesus and God and man, and it's just like this dual identity and two people at the same time, and it must have stuck with me. It's in my brain. Can't get it out.
I was thinking maybe I was going to ask you what you have done in your past lives. You know, never mind.
I will never tell.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about The Butcher and the Liar. Um, First of all, I mean, without even letting people who are listening or watching know what the book is about, there's a ghost that plays a critical role in this book, and yet is not the primary character.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about, first of all, how The Butcher and the Liar came about, and then tell us how did you end up with this sort of sidekick ghost that plays such a crucial role.
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, and I lived actually right next to a cattle auction. And I remember going there, and they're very like vivid memories for me, and the sounds and the smells of running along the catwalks as a little kid and watching the auctions and watching all the movement of cows and the animals. And then when I lived in Chicago, I mentioned I lived in the old meatpacking district that was quickly sort of evolving into a more sort of trendy, upscale restaurant, foodie neighborhood. And but when we moved there, like there weren't really sidewalks; they were still functioning meatpacking plants, and so I don't know the juxtaposition of those two places, the commonality there. I was like, there's a story here, there's something here, and I think when you have like memories that are so vivid like that, you have to do something with them. You have to get them out, and I think everything that I write really starts from setting. I don't think of characters first. I don't think of story first. I think of setting first, and then I'm like, well, what happens in this setting? Um, and so those two settings together, that's how the story unfolded. Um, and the ghost, I didn't. This book went through many edits. Mostly because it's a dual timeline, so it's Daisy as an adult and Daisy as a youngster, and it's mostly the adult version that went through the biggest edits. But the youngster version was pretty consistent along the road, little tweaks here and there, but and I think it was just very much because it stemmed from that sort of subconscious, place in your mind. And I can't tell you what, like, where the ghost came from. I just thought when because Daisy is, I mean, the story is about Daisy who finds out her father is a serial killer. That happens right away. And so, what weird, creepy, terrible thing can happen after that? How about a ghost?
Yeah.
And the ghost is really like, as I started writing it, I realized, this is not a terrifying ghost that's there to haunt. It's the personification of Daisy's shame, her guilt, the lie that she carries throughout her life, and but also it represents like a kind of hope for her, and really the only familial figure that she has that's consistent and stays with her. And they have a very familial relationship where they're mean and picking at each other, and then the next minute they're they love each other, and then the next minute they're just like, leave me the hell alone. And yeah, it just was that was a very organic part of the story as it unfolded.
Those are some of my favorite things where it's almost like a gift where like you're writing and this thing just occurs to you and you're like, well, I'll try it, see what happens with that. And that sounds like kind of like, no, this fits. This makes sense, And then sometimes I feel like when I go back to something I wrote, people often explain it better than I do. They're like, well, this is because of that, like, right? And I'm like, yes, what you said, that thing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of my favorite things about actually then publishing the book is seeing other people tell me what it's about. And I'm like, oh yeah, that is what it's about. That is perfect. Because I don't know what it is about writers that I think a lot of us we're great with the story. And then you ask us to do a summary and I'm like, I don't, you just shut down. I can't, I don't know what's important. I can't pick things out. It just becomes, it's much harder than writing the novel itself.
Well, if you could have written it in 300 words, you would have done that. So, like,
Right, exactly.
Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
No, I was to say I think that's the magic of a good writer, is that it inspires these thoughts in the minds of the reader, and compels them to sort of analyze what they see in your book. It's like looking at a great painting.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody sees something different, or some nuance, and I think a great book does that. Um, so I've got to ask you a really serious question. What's the name of your own ghost?
Procrastination.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think same one that visits me from time to time.
Yeah.
So, have you got
Or,
something you'd like to read to us out of Butcher and the Liar?
sure. So I decided to would just read right out of the first chapter.
Yeah.
Okay. I never
Oh yeah,
imagined. Oh,
I
sorry.
was going to say, oh yeah, for all those who are watching, that's what the book looks like. Look for that one at your local bookstore.
Indeed.
Got mine as well. Yeah.
I never imagined the house would be gone. My childhood home, the white wood siding, the brick fireplace, the large porch with its green rug that had faded from the southern exposure, and the loose metal railing along the concrete steps. They were now an empty lot littered with garbage and broken glass shimmering in the evening sun. The whole block was dilapidated, the houses left to chip and wilt, the lawns overgrown. Maybe it had always been that way, but as a child I hadn't noticed. It was 4th Street, not Appleberry Lane. It had never been a particularly lovely block, but it had a mediocre charm that was absent now. Terrible, isn't it? I turned to find a man standing behind me. His gray hair was untidy, and his overalls reminded me that I was home. What's that? They tore it down. The city did, I mean. He pointed at the lot with his cane, a shopping bag hanging from his wrist. Bad things happened in that house. No one in their right mind would live there. City couldn't sell it. His head turned left and right, and he made a sound of disappointment. Whole block isn't worth much anymore. My gaze followed his, taking in the area. Most of the homes had been built in the early 20th century, crafted with strong and elegant oak, capable of withstanding years of weather and neglect, reminiscent of the people who lived inside. Craftsman porches adorned the fronts, aged wooden swings creaking as they swayed back and forth. The wind blew wisps of escaped hair into my face, and I reached up to smooth them back. You looking for something? Someone? He asked. Oh no, I'm just taking a walk. I suddenly felt like an intruder stepping into someone else's life, someone else's territory, someone else's history. Not much to see here. There are better places in town to take a walk. You're not one of those enthusiasts, are you? His face told me I hadn't been the first visitor here and that visitors weren't welcome. No, I replied with a reassuring smile, just taking a walk. You do know what happened in that house, don't you? I looked back at the lot. I do. Like I said, city couldn't sell it after that. I wasn't surprised. I couldn't imagine happiness capable of surviving in such a place. Terrible, just terrible, he mumbled as he braced himself against the cane and continued down the block. My eyes closed and I remembered what had been there before. And when I opened them, I'd seen enough.
I love that. And hearing you talk about the importance of the setting, it totally makes sense that this would be in the first chapter, that you really get to
Yeah.
see kind of this crumbled remains of the city and memories and like, I don't know, it works on a lot of levels. So I'm curious if, well, I don't know, the date, 1988, or the year 1988, was that chosen haphazardly with intention because of a specific event in that year? Or, um, I don't know, sometimes I get super nerdy and I'm like, I'm gonna pick a date. And then I'm like, what happened that year? And I go back and I find this hyper specific thing that nobody else will pay attention to, but for me, it's important. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah. I think a lot of it was that. So there are a lot of references in the book to TV because
Yeah.
Daisy grows up without a lot of parenting. And so she's very much a TV watcher. And that's how she sort of understands the world through television programs. And I wanted to make sure that I could speak to them somewhat realistically. So I picked my own, history and the things that I watched a lot as a kid. And so it was probably more trouble, and it was worth going through and making sure, okay, because I referenced like A Different World, which was one of my favorite shows. And I'm like, okay, well, the last season would have been this year. Is that the same year that and then, as my husband was like, if it's off by 6 months, nobody's going to notice. And I was like, no, it has to be the same. Um, and then I actually, because in the book, the references that the stock market, the cattle market closes and shuts down in 2015, which is actually the true date that this particular cattle market that I grew up with had shut down. And so wanting that date, because I wrote it after 2015, but it's sort of tied back to that date. And that was, a reader's not going to know that. That's kind of one of those things that you mentioned, Michael. It's like, that's more for me, I guess.
Yeah.
So I nerded out a little bit about that, I suppose.
And I have to be honest, I did check one of the shows because I was like, I don't know, this seems too late or too early. Like I couldn't remember, and it was spot on. So well done.
Okay, good. Made me nervous.
The,
Don't call me out.
the moral of that story is someone will notice.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yes.
There's always someone who'll do that.
There is
Um,
one thing in there that is not related to the television at all that someone called out, and I was like, oh, that is true. It was and I'm not going to say what it is,
okay.
but it was.
So do we get a prize if we find it?
Nope.
No. Okay. All right. Um, Steph, you do something that very few writers that I have read have been able to do. You took a absolutely ghoulish villain and gave them a heart and a soul. And how did you do that? How did you conjure that? Um, because it is one of the things that I think makes your book so special. Um, the worst villain in the world, and you make
Mhm.
them a almost likable human being.
Almost sympathetic, right?
Yeah, oh, there you go,
I think
almost
the
sympathetic.
reason I think that really stems from the fact that you know Daisy's father through Daisy only, right? We have no
Uh,
other perspective of him whatsoever. And as a kid, especially someone so young when this happens, he's her dad, right? He's the only dad she's ever known, and he was a good dad up until then, and kind of still after a little bit, sort of not. But a kid is going to have some pretty, bipolar feelings about their father, who is a serial killer, but still their father, and I think the only way you can really humanize a serial killer is to look at them through the eyes of a child that is theirs, because they're the only ones that are going to see anything besides that after that. So I think that's really the key. And even as an adult, right, you only hear from and experience the father through her. And she's an adult now, but she still is experiencing him as a child at the same time. So um and he's not, nobody's completely evil and no one's completely good. So he's not completely evil in every single way, even though he is completely evil. But he's still a father, and he interacts with his child, and in his weird, awful, demented way cares for her. Um, and so that's the perspective, yeah.
I think, and you walk that balance really well. I mean, that was something I admired also, and I think it made very realistically, like as a child, you only know your experience, and this is your father, and at least for 9 years of her life, she didn't know about whatever was happening in the basement previous to that, whether there is or not pre that experience with her, and you know until you have other experiences with other people's parents. Like I remember the first like sleepover going to somebody's house and being like, "Oh, they have different cereal. This is weird," and like
Right.
just stupid little things like that. But the TV is one of those windows into other possibilities, and so
Mhm.
for me, I loved that you provided all those examples of those like must see TV Thursday episodes that were all built around family because she had these kind of holes and gaps, but they are mirrors for her to kind of hold up against what was happening in our own household. So, um,
Yep, that's what it's about. Thank you. I
yes.
do.
okay.
So I've had I'm trying to engage on Instagram. And so when people read the book, they'll post about it, and then they'll put their opinion, and then they'll have like a question at the end to try to garner engagement. And very often the question has been, if you knew your parent was a serial killer, would you turn them in? And I think overwhelmingly people are like, of course I would turn them in, and then, these people hadn't read the book or whatever. So they don't know that we're talking about a child. But I think about that still, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know that anybody would. I mean, it'd have to be a pretty, and you'd have to have other influences in your life, which she does not. So
And as the sole parent in the house, like, I don't know. I mean, that would really throw caution to the wind. Like as a kid, I could imagine just being terrified. Like, I don't know who takes care of me then. Like,
right.
yeah, Caleb's mom
Yeah.
might help her out, but like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah, she's not a replacement. Yeah.
yeah.
So amongst Daisy's trauma and trying to live through it, um, you introduce a love interest that isn't a love interest at the beginning, um, but a friend, a boy. Um, where did he come from? What was the motivating uh, process behind giving her this stalwart friend?
Hmm. I think she just needed something that wasn't terrible, right? Even the ghost, who's like not necessarily, she has a relationship with, but it's a ghost, right? It's not a
Yeah.
person that you can interact with. And so she's kind of a messed up kid. She doesn't really have any friends. Um, So I really wanted to sort of force this relationship upon her where that happens like just before she learns about her father and is thrust into that life. And um, he sort of represents both, you know, the rest of the world and what could have been or could be, and also what she wants more than anything is to have this friendship and this normal life, and you know, the family next door, which is lovely, imperfect but lovely, and uh, but doesn't feel that she deserves that or that she can ever have that, because inevitably her she would, you know, her lies would become exposed. And so it's really just a representation, you know, that character represents what could be, what should be, you know, what a normal life should be for her that she just won't be able to have.
So when this book ends, Daisy is still, well, I guess you'd say Daisy was on the light side of being middle-aged at the end of the book, I think. So is there another Daisy Bellon book in there somewhere?
Not at this time. I'm not really sure
Okay.
where I feel like I've, at least at this point in time, I feel like I've told that story. I'm
Okay.
not sure what the next step would be. Um, so no, not yet.
No, not yet. Okay.
Unless, you know, lightning strikes and there's some kind of inspiration, but
I'm curious. So the almost every review talks about genre bending, right? Like and I don't know. The question I have, I mean, the direct question to you, and I'll give you a second to, because I'll vamp for a moment, but the question really is like, what books do you see it on the shelf next to in your mind? Because I think as a writer, you like write the story that you wanted to tell, and I can kind of picture like my books. I'm like, well, these are the other people I'd be hanging out with, like, and so I'm wondering like, who are the people hanging out with the Butcher and the Liar on the shelf in your mind?
yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. Um, I didn't really think about genre when I was writing it, and then it wasn't until afterwards where I was like, oh, these are, you know, people are going to label it, and it needs to be in a genre, but it could be in a gazillion different genres. For me, I think I probably write like what I love to read, and so I love Alice Hoffman and Amy Harmon, and I like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. These like mysteries. Sometimes there's like an element of magical realism or like
Hmm.
paranormal, but like very subtle, you know, something kind of um, tempered, but just like interesting, weird, tragic, wonderful stories. Yeah, I being labeled a thriller was like a reach for me because I read thrillers, but I'm not like a huge thriller reader. And so I've read more thrillers, I think, in the last like 8 months than I have in my whole life because I'm like, okay, is this a thriller? Like, I need to be able to speak to thrillers if it's labeled a thriller. But, you know, it certainly has thriller elements. But
I think it goes far beyond the thriller. I have I have described it as Sweeney Todd meets the Thornbirds
oh my gosh,
because
okay.
because it is
I love
it
it.
is it is among other things a wonderful love story, which with all the angst and hurdles and everything that goes into wonderful love stories, on top of being this, well, how do you write a coming of age story of someone who knows, that they're at age 9 that their father is a serial killer? And you did. I mean, it is a marvelous book. Um,
You, your
Michael,
your comment about reading all the thrillers and going like, I don't know, is this it? Made me think of like and I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but like the Mario Puzo story about writing The Godfather and adapting it as a screenplay. And then he was like, "Oh, I did this thing and great, but now I should really learn how to write a screenplay." So he went back to read all these screenplay books, and they're like, "See The Godfather," and he was like, "Ah, I guess I got it." Like I kind of feel like at a
Yeah,
certain point, like you've written the thing, and
yeah.
it is just the thing,
It is
and you're
great.
like, and yeah, you can kind of, I mean, for me, like picking the genre is hard. I mean, I see a lot of like, and it's, kind of a dirty word in the genre novel, area, but like literary fiction, it's kind of, it has elements of that, and I don't, I think people can kind of find what they want in it, which is
Mhm.
great. And it's also kind of an amazing magic trick. So what were you going to say,
Uh,
Rob? Sorry.
oh, I was just going to say you'd said where do you see the book on the bookshelf between whom and whom? And I did that experiment once at the suggestion of an agent. And so I went to the shelf, the last name Jung, Jung, and realized that my book was going to be directly between James Joyce and Franz Kafka.
Tall
And
order.
I thought immediately of changing my name to Aardvark or something like that. But you know,
Double A would
anyway,
put you toward the beginning of the list. That'd be a good idea.
yeah, right at the top. So, um, well, Steph, we like to finish our podcasts with this lightning round idea. These little short questions that are designed to give the viewer and the listener a little insight into you, the outside of your writing endeavors. So, Michael, you got one to kick us off, or did I just put you on the spot?
No, no, that's fine. I'm really curious about early books. I always love like those, I don't know, the books you read as a child. What were those like formative stories that you were reading that stuck with you? Um, or when did you find that first book that kind of spoke to you for whatever reason?
Um, I think I didn't really get and I wasn't like a junior high reader. I think I found my reading in high school and then in college too. But specifically in high school, I remember reading Great Expectations and just loving every second of it. That's probably still one of my absolute favorite books ever. Scarlet Letter. I mean, these
Oh,
are classic like high school books, but
yeah.
I loved them and they really stuck with me. Now that I think about it, that makes a lot of sense. When I go think about what I write, I'm like, yep, these two books on that makes sense.
Yeah.
Then, and when I was in college, I really fell into this like postmodern, catch 22. Um, what's the one? I can't remember the title. But I read a lot of like Dan DeLillo and books like that I just fell in love with that really like very thought provoking and made me sort of think outside of where I had historically thought. Um, yeah, those were my favorites. But
Okay.
now I find that I read a little bit of everything. I love literary fiction, I love romance, I love mysteries, I like things with magical realism, just really weird, unique stories are my favorite probably. Sort of take you
So,
someplace unexpected, yeah.
in light of your answer and your genre bending, if the sky wasn't blue, what color would you paint it?
So, there's this thing in my head that immediately comes to mind, and I don't know where it came from, but it's always like one of those lines that sticks with me, and it's just the sky, and it was like something like the sky is purple when you look at it through my eyes or something like that. And I don't know if I made it up or if I read it somewhere or it just I don't know, it stuck with me and like I kind of think about it once in a while and I don't know why. It doesn't mean anything, but it's just kind of like stuck in my brain. So I'd have to say purple.
Well, the sky would be purple. I love it.
So I'm curious about cooking or baking, or if you have a preference. And so, like, if we were to come over for a meal for whatever reason, what are you known for? Like, what do you typically make?
Uh, I'm known for my spouse who does all the cooking.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would bring my spouse with me, and he would cook.
Okay. Yeah, and he would cook it. I love
Yeah.
it.
But I am a
Oh,
very good sous chef. I'm very good at sitting at the counter, drinking a glass of wine, and mixing things that are handed to me.
okay.
And then assembling tacos and putting things on top of things at the end. Yeah, I'm pretty good at that too.
I love it. Um, so if there was anybody, living or dead, you could spend a day with, who would it be? And what would you talk about?
That's so hard.
Okay,
Um,
okay. We'll give you a table. You can put three people around it.
oh, that's
Oh,
even
sorry.
harder.
Oh, okay.
I have
All
to
right,
come up
never
with
mind
three.
then.
Well, one I would love. I've always so one of my absolute favorite books is The Scarlet Pimpernel,
Hmm.
which was written in 1905 by this woman, and her name is Baroness Orsi. I think I'm saying her last name correctly. I've never actually heard it said. Um, and it's the first um, novel or like modern novel that introduces this notion of a true secret identity, right? So it's about this gentleman who dresses up to save people
Yep.
in the French. Well, I can't remember what it's called. Don't get me started on history. So I just love this book, and I've loved it since college. And I love that it was written by a female, and I just thought about her quite a bit and wondered what that was like to be
Hmm.
a novelist. In late 1800, early 1900, writing something that was so unique and different. And I don't know, I just love to pick her brain. Uh, and then if anyone else,
That's it.
I don't know, maybe Elvis. I don't know.
Okay. I like that combination.
Any
Yeah.
other
Okay.
ones? I love that
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, I
So,
guess, yeah. It's like Madame Bovary and General MacArthur,
Yeah,
you
there you
know.
go.
Yeah, something.
so I'm curious, as a relatively new resident to Minnesota, what are some of the things about the state that you have discovered that are like secret joys or pleasures?
Oh, goodness. Um, well, I absolutely love my neighborhood. I live in a 150-year-old house, and most of the houses around me are 150 years old, give or take, and it's beautiful, and there's always something new to see. Um, I I don't know. Anytime anyone speaks about like the first ring suburbs and beyond, I don't know what they're talking about. I was like, I haven't gotten that far yet. But I don't know. I'm a big foodie, so we not a cooker. I don't cook, but I eat. So we go out a lot and explore new places and new restaurants. And I've been incredibly impressed by the support that I've found in a place where I'm not from. And I've, again, been here 3 years, but I feel like the community of writers and people just willing to support writers and to share, um, the news of the book and and what I'm doing is just way more lovely than I ever would have expected. Um, I think the thing that surprised me most about being here is actually how much I've sort of just fallen into the community and been welcomed, and people are very kind, and um yeah, it's just lovely. I'm very impressed.
Michael, don't tell her. Well, it just means we fooled another one, Michael.
Okay, okay.
And neither of us are native to Minnesota, honestly, to be true. I'm
Uh,
from Ann Arbor, Michigan, essentially, and Rob is West Coast. I mean, you
Oh,
grew
wow.
up here, though. So, like, in fairness, Rob has much more of a stake than I do. So,
yeah. Well, I've been around longer than both of you added up together, so my stakes are deep in the ground. Um, Steph, have you ever desired to be traditionally published?
Uh, sure. I mean, when I first started, absolutely. That's like what I wanted. That's what I tried to do with the very first book that is not published, but that I wrote. Um, and then after a while, it's very heartbreaking
Yeah.
the querying process and all of that. And after a while, I was just like, you know what? I have a job. I have the means to do this. Let's just do it. Let's do it on my own and let's make a go of it and see how it works. But I have a hard time imagining like not owning my own story. I think that's the only thing that really now would keep me from being traditionally. I mean, if someone offered it to me now, would I say no? Probably not. I mean, it's a great opportunity, but I haven't pursued it since then because I don't know, the idea of, yeah, it was a heartbreaking process. And then the idea of not owning your baby,
Yep.
that's a hard
Sure.
pill to swallow, I think. I mean, a lot of people do it, so I'm sure it's not that bad if you get in the right situation. But, I've talked to a lot of authors, both self-published, independently published, and traditionally published. And there's not necessarily like, you know, a path to success in traditional publishing either. It's not like an obvious path. It still can be quite arduous and, you're doing a lot of the work on your own, but
Right.
it's
Absolutely.
so I mean, maybe someday that would be okay. I'm not against it. I don't know. We'll see
Okay.
what happens.
All right. Let a wrap-up question. Been a delightful hour, but if you were going to give a word of advice to a prospective author, someone who is thinking about it or is struggling through their first manuscript, what would it be?
Hmm. I still feel like I'm in the stage where I need advice. But hmm, I think probably one of the things that I needed to learn, and I learned very slowly, was that it's okay to set it aside for like a very long time. Like Butcher and the Liar, I set aside for several years before I came back to it because I was
Mhm.
so in my head about it. I couldn't get the story, was and I didn't want to put something out there that I wasn't 100% happy with yet. And so I just had to put it aside for a very long time and then revisit it. And then when I did that, it was very easy to see it from a new perspective and in a new light. And I think forcing it when sometimes time away was probably one of the biggest things that I've learned. And so I might share that with someone who was working on a new manuscript. If you're really, really, really stuck, work on something else and come back to it.
That's such a hard lesson to learn. I mean, you're right.
Mhm.
Oh,
It's always better for that, but man, I mean, when you have the thing and you're like, no, no, I just need to finish it. Like, I need to get on to the next step or whatever. And it's like, I mean, I admire that you had the wherewithal to be like, no, this is not where I want it to go yet. Set it aside and then do something else, in the
Right.
meantime. But God, that is hard, but very important. I agree.
and it is
Yes.
a great bit of wisdom on which to wrap up our podcast for the evening. Steph, thanks ever so much for spending an hour with us.
Thank you
Uh,
for having me.
and everybody, the book is The Butcher and the Liar. Find it at your local bookstore. They can order it for you if they don't have it. Um, I'm
We'll
done.
be
That's my
sure to
sermon for
include
the.
her webpage down below so you can find it easily, click and all that stuff. And yeah, thanks. It was wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you. Loved it.
Good night, Steph.
Good night.
And don't forget, you can see this book and more from Minnesota authors in the Bell Cow catalog, heading to libraries and indie bookstores across Minnesota and beyond.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bell Cow Author Roundup podcast. We'll be back next Tuesday with another amazing Minnesota author.